Hi everyone, it's Amanda. Today I'm going to be doing a long overdue recent reads video of the 21 books I've read in the past couple months. Stay tuned if you want to see what I've been reading, recommendations, and I'm going to try to keep it as short as I can for these, but also still give you some good recs. So if you'd like to see those, just keep watching and be sure to like, subscribe down below for more bookish content from me. I'd love to have you here. So the first book is one that I just finished. It's The 13th Child by Erin C. Craig, and this book is gorgeous. It has these sparkly gold edges, and not Erin C. Craig, Erin A. Craig, my bad. She lives in Michigan, and so I've met her before at a signing, and it was glorious and beautiful. And she's actually going to be at a Barnes & Noble near me soon as well, so I might go get this one signed. But I loved this book so much. I actually was not expecting to be so emotional at the end of this book. I cried in the epilogue. It was so beautiful, so well written. It was everything that I wanted in a fall read. And so if you're looking for something kind of gothic fairy tale vibes, this, oh my god, my dog's hair was in my nose, and this one will do it for you. We have the God of Death in this one, and you might be thinking, okay, how many Hades retellings are we gonna have? I know it's overplayed, but this one is nothing like the others. It's not a romance between the God of Death and the female main character. He is actually a fatherly figure, and it was just beautiful. It's following a retelling of the Godfather death story from the Grimm's fairy tales. In this one, we follow Hazel, our female main character. She is unwanted and unloved by her family. Her parents didn't want her, so they offer her up to the gods. A bunch of different gods offer different things to the parents, and the bargain that is made is with the dreadful end, the God of Death. And he doesn't come for her for 12 years. And so she feels like she's not wanted by anybody, just not even her own family, but even the man who supposedly wanted her has left her to fend for herself for 12 years, and she has been kind of in an abusive, neglectful home for those years. She never got celebrated for her birthday, and she kind of was left to starve a little bit and didn't have a bed. She slept in an outdoor barn, and it was just such bad living circumstances. Her mom and her had this kind of, she wanted to love her mom, but her mom was so uncaring, and so you kind of wonder, like, how can you give love to this motherly figure that never showed you love? But it really showed the dynamic between a child, even when it can be one of the most abusive relationships. And so, oh, I just loved it so much. And when we meet Merrick, who is the God of Death, you kind of fall in love with him as well, like, and his love for her is shown in different ways, and it kind of shows different love languages and how he can't really understand a mortal's desires to be loved. He just thinks like providing for her is enough, but she needs emotional support. So we follow her throughout her life, and on her 18th birthday she actually gets called to the king, who is sick with this illness. She's became a notorious healer through gifts given to her by the God of Death, and so she is sent to heal the king of this mysterious illness. And from there, the story takes off on a mystery plot, as well as a little bit of romance between her and the prince, who she has met before when she was a child. He's kind of emotionally unavailable, he's a little bit snarky, and it's just really fun, but it's also such a loving story. There's a lot about life in this one, and mortality, and how you choose to spend your life. It's almost like the moments that you'll remember the most are the most mundane in your lifetime, and that's kind of what this book says so much more beautifully than I can. But 5 stars for this one, no doubt. It was such a wholesome read and very emotional in the epilogue. Alright, next up we have a dark romance, Shattered Hearts by Shea Ruby. This one definitely lives up to its name. It is gut-wrenching. You almost feel your heart squeeze. We follow characters that are battling addiction in their own ways. Hallie, our female main character, she is addicted to Xanax, and self-harms. And then the male main character, he's battling a drug addiction and he ends up getting into heroin, which leads to very self-destructive behaviors on both of their ends. And this relationship is so toxic, but yet they can't give each other up. It gives a little bit of insta-lust, insta-love vibes in the beginning of the book, which I didn't know if I would be a fan of at first because that's where the book was headed and I didn't feel super connected to the romance aspect of this book at first. But then once they're together, you see why that happened, and it's because they are so wrong and right for each other at the same time, and they have these behaviors that they cling to each other's darkness. It's a really raw depiction of battling with addiction and the family dynamic. You get to see the mother and son relationship and how hard that is for the mom. The mom actually warns Hallie to stay away from her son, but Hallie, of course, just can't. She feels this deep bond with him because of her own battles. So this book really pulls on your heartstrings because you get to see these characters that are battling things that they really don't deserve to be battling, and it's really a hard read. If you like dark romance, I feel like you'll really like this one. And the next book is a love triangle, perhaps, I've heard. So we'll see how that goes, but I'm definitely going to pick up the next one. This one was a 4-star for me. Next we have A Dark and Drowning Tide by Allison Saft. This is Allison's adult debut. It had some darkness to it. It had some lightheartedness. It had a mystery. It had an expedition and sapphic romance. Very slow burn, I will say. This one's very short, but it doesn't feel that way. So I rated this one 4 stars. I really enjoyed some aspects of this book, but at the same time, there were aspects that I didn't like. Some of the writing was a little bit choppy and the pacing was sometimes very slow and then changed drastically. So I don't know, there was something about it that kind of got boring at times, but at the same time I didn't put this one down. So it was really hard for me to kind of dissect why I didn't like portions of it. But I really loved Lorelai as a main character. She is somebody who doesn't let people get close to her, but also yearns for love. And the yearning in this book, oh, her and Sylvia literally loved each other from day one, but they just are dedicated to not understanding one another. And Sylvia's like, I was in love with you this whole time, but Lorelai just couldn't see it. And Lorelai projects her own insecurities onto others. So, or is that the right thing to say? I don't know. She lets herself feel people judging her for things that she's judging herself about. And it's not necessarily true of the other people. The people aren't thinking the things that she's thinking that they are thinking, you know? And I feel like I resonated with that a lot. I feel like I do that all the time. I'm constantly thinking, oh my God, this person hates me because XYZ, when really, that's just not the case, my girl. Like, calm down. Let your mind settle. So that was kind of frustrating, but also relatable at the same time. And then we had Sylvia, who was seemingly perfect, this angel of a human. We get to see her from Lorelai's eyes, and Lorelai's just obsessed with her, thinks she's the most beautiful thing in the whole world. They're on this expedition to find this magical spring that is all powerful. There's a lot of like politics going on the side. There's a mystery plot because their mentor dies, and so they have to carry on with this expedition without the mentor and also find out who's murdering people, because it's getting a little bit scary. And so it's kind of like almost heisty, but so good. I really liked it. I just didn't love it as much as I wanted to, but I did really like the romance in this one. Very slow burn though, so keep that in mind. Next we have a football romance, Endgame by Monica Murphy. This is an arc that I read. It came out on September 17th, so it is out now. And I really like this one. I rated it 4 stars. The only thing that I didn't like was you didn't get much depth into the characters, or as much as I wanted. I wanted more between Everly and her mom and kind of the story behind them and their relationship, but I did really like the romance. It was very fun and fresh, as Monica Murphy's always are. So in this one we follow Everly. She's really down on her luck in the beginning of the book. She doesn't have her housing arrangements anymore. They fell through, and so she's in search of a home, and she overhears this group of football players talking about how they need a new roommate. And so what do you think is gonna happen? They were roommates, so they end up coming to an agreement. She ends up rooming with a bunch of football jocks and meeting Nico, who is our male main character. He's a playboy, so we have reformed playboy in this book. He doesn't do commitment, but he just can't help himself when it comes to Everly. It was so good. The spice was so fun in this book, but it was also a little bit of a slower burn for Monica Murphy's books. If you've read a lot of her books, this one was a slower one than she usually writes, but I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed their relationship push and pull and the banter between them. So very fun if you wanted like a Super Bowl type romance or like a book to read while you're watching football. Here we go. Next we have The Games Gods Play, which was one that I picked up on a whim because it was so gorgeous. Look at these edges. I picked it up as an early release. I found it at a bookstore before it was out, and so I was like, oh my god, I have it before anyone else. And wow, like it was just so fun to read. I remember I just didn't want to put it down. Like it was playing out like a movie in my mind, and the trials in this one are so much fun. It's a very deadly competition, so that's where the Hunger Games aspect comes in. But I feel like this one was a lot more like lighthearted in many ways. Didn't take itself too seriously. The writing style is definitely one that could lead to some negative reviews. I think some people won't mesh well with it just because it's kind of a light-hearted kind of writing style. We have a world where gods choose mortals to fight on their behalf. And it ends up being so fun because there is some found family in this book with the alliances that are chosen. And Hades, the relationship in this book, is also so good. The spice that happens, like there's not a lot of it, but when there is, it was very juicy. And then there's also a female main character who is cursed to never be loved. So she was cursed as a child. The ending is also kind of a cliffhanger a little bit, so I can't wait for the next book to come out. But yeah, the competitions in this book were unique, and it differentiated itself from the Hunger Games in that way because they were all set by the other gods, so they all made sense. Like Poseidon's was in this cave and had sea monsters that they had to battle, and it was just unique and really fun to read about. And if you like Greek mythology and the Hunger Games, you need to read it. You need to read it. Next up, we have two Kelsey Kingsley books. So this is a new to me author, and I ended up picking up both of these back to back. They follow similar worlds, so they're companion novels. But let's start with Saving Rain, which is the first one. In Saving Rain, we follow Soldier throughout his life, and he currently lives with his grandparents and his mother in the beginning of the book, but unfortunately his grandparents pass away, and he ends up living with his mother, who is battling addiction, and it's really hard for him. You get to see his life as he grows up and just learns more about why his mother wasn't at Christmas and all these holidays, and learns the reality, the harsh reality of his life and why his mom wasn't always present when his grandparents were raising him. And so that's really hard for him to come to terms with, and it really breaks your heart as you connect with him more. And as he grows up, he ends up trying to sell his mom's drugs. So he gets in with the wrong crowd. And the reason why he's doing this is because in his mind as a teenager, he thinks, if I get rid of the drugs, she won't have any more. Not knowing that she will do whatever it takes to get them. Like, she would rather not pay the electricity bill than not have her drugs. So they end up not having electricity in many times in this book, and so he has to get a job and can't go to school because he has to keep the lights on at home. One day when he's selling the pills, they end up being laced with fentanyl, and he ends up killing his best friend, Billy, who was getting into drugs, and he couldn't really stop him. And he's actually from this family that was really well off, and he kind of loved Billy's mom, and Billy's mom treated him like his own son. And so when this happens, it just breaks his heart and really breaks him as a person even more than he already was. And he ends up going to prison and really feeling the weight of this decision on him and the guilt of it just his whole life. And so when he gets out of prison, he goes back to his mom and ends up seeing her life. It's still in shambles, and he just really needs to cut it off with her. Oh, it's just It's heartbreaking. I cried my eyes out in this book, and now you're wondering, like, okay, Amanda, I thought you said this was a romance. Yes, there was a woman that he met when he was a teenager that he saved from being sexually assaulted, and he's never forgotten that moment. He thinks it's the only good that he's ever done is saved Rain. And so when he gets out of prison, they end up reconnecting in a new way, and it kind of follows that. I won't give away too much. I feel like I've already talked a lot about the plot, but it has a lot of depth to the story and forgiveness, forgiving yourself and also forgiveness from others. It has some suspense as well towards the end. So if you want a darker, suspenseful, emotional read, pick this one up. It was heart-wrenching, but really good. So after that was a 5-star, by the way. After that, I picked up Spider in the Storm, which follows, it's in the same world. So Soldier ends up being in this book towards the latter half. But this book follows a boy who was bullied as a child, very harshly bullied, okay? And he now lives in a cemetery. He's very isolated and he likes to live his life alone. His brother's in prison for killing his bully. Really weighs on him. They lost their parents very young as well, and his brother ended up battling addiction as well. So lots of trigger warnings in these books, but this book was just as emotional as Saving Rain. However, I didn't feel as connected to the characters in this one. For some reason, this one just didn't connect with me as much as Saving Rain, and I did end up crying still because goddamn, like, it really got me at the end, but I still felt like this one was a little bit too long, so I ended up rating it 3.5 stars. It still follows a romance between two characters that are alike in many ways, and they end up bonding over their similarities and opening up to each other when they really preferred to be isolated from the world. So definitely give this one a go. Give this author a try and see if you like her. I ended up really liking her writing style. It's very poetic in some ways, so some people probably won't like that kind of style. It has a lot of quotable quotes in it, but it really worked for me. Next up, we have Where There's a Will by Ember Hughes, which is actually Daisy Jane. It's her new pen name for her dark romance books. And this book was very dark. Lots of triggers. It's a captor, well, in some ways, I guess, captive. It has kidnapping in it. But let's lay it out in the scene. So Colton is our main character. He ran away from his hometown when he was younger because he got heartbroken by his neighbor who was his lover, and they were supposed to be together forever. You know, they were in love. Her name is Kinsley, I think. And he ends up having to go back because his sister needs him when his father passes away. And so there's a lot to do at the ranch. And he ends up going back, and when he does, he wonders where Kinsley is because nobody knows where she is, where she was, where she ran off to. People think that she just ran away as well and doesn't know what happened to her. But he ends up coming across her when he gets kidnapped by her dad, who has been abusing her and trafficking people for years and has locked her up in this horrible situation. And now he's locked Colton up and is abusing him, and it's horrendous what is happening. But the plot of this one is super like high stakes. It feels more like a thriller in some ways. It's very like suspenseful because you're wondering how he's gonna get away and how are they both gonna get away. Like, Kinsley needs to get out of this situation as well because she's being sexually abused as well as emotionally abused. It's very traumatic. It definitely doesn't shy away from those harder topics, so definitely take the trigger warnings seriously. The romance in this one, I felt like I didn't love that aspect that much. Like, it didn't feel as believable for me. I didn't love the way that they got together, and I wasn't sure I really felt like they should be. I didn't feel like the childhood lovers thing, I guess. It was kind of fast for me, but also just kind of traumatic. But I did like the suspense plot and the story overall, so that's why I rated this one 4 stars. It was really good in the plot, like it was so suspenseful, and so for that reason I really loved it. But the romance part of it I could have done without, I guess, is what I'm saying. Then I did read Five Brothers by Penelope Douglas when it came out, and it was a 5-star. However, I was sad that it didn't meet my credence expectations. Missed opportunities were had because I thought that there would be a scene with like multiple brothers, but no, there wasn't, okay? Do with that what you will. But it was a very good romance. I won't give away too much. It's kind of a mystery who she ends up with, so I don't want to spoil anything in that regard. But it was really well done, and I loved the messages behind the book and having something to fight for. But if you didn't like Credence, but you like other books by them, you should definitely also give this a shot, because the title, I feel like, alludes to things that don't actually happen in the book. Next we have a 2-star read, which is the only one that I wouldn't recommend off this list, but at the same time a lot of people really love this book, and maybe I just read it at the wrong time. But this one is Graves, which is a stalker dark romance, and we follow Xaden and Dominic. They're twin brothers, and Xaden is the one that originally gets obsessed with our female main character, Blake. He ends up going into her home and things and watching her sleep. Super creepy vibes. Anyway, he ends up killing someone for her. So touch her and you die is legitimate in this book. And he ends up going to prison. So when he's in prison, he asks his twin brother, Dominic, to look out for her from afar. Just watch over her, make sure that everything is okay. And Dominic agrees, but when he meets her, he ends up falling for her as well. So that gets hairy when Xaden gets out of prison and finds out that his brother has also been falling in love with Blake. And enter this really just not my thing. You'd think it was my thing, but there was something about this that was kind of melodramatic to me, and it just wasn't the read that I needed in the moment, so I ended up really not liking it. Super kind of trope heavy dark romances. I feel like this book had a lot of like the trigger words for dark romances these days. Like the author really played into the kinks or whatever that people are reading right now, and it just overdid it for me. I think that's what it was. Next we have a novella, Passion and Venom, which is a mafia romance, and it's very short, but don't let that fool you. This thing is spicy. There's so much spice in this book, but it was really good. I rated it 4 stars. I really liked it. It was so unhinged. Our male main character kills our female main character's husband on their wedding day and ends up taking her captive, and it's just wild, but so much fun. And I really do want to continue on with the series. I think it's a series of novellas, or maybe they do get bigger as they go on, but super fun, really quick read. I know a lot of you might have heard of this one, and if you haven't read it yet, definitely give it a shot if you like mafia romances. The next one is perhaps my most surprising read. It's Catch the Sun by Jennifer Hartman. So this one I was not anticipating loving, or I wasn't even going to read it at first because it is pitched as a young adult romance, and I just feel like I don't resonate with those as well anymore. But I am so wrong about my taste, because this one absolutely tore my heart apart, ripped it up into shreds, put it back together, then ripped it out again, stomped on it. I don't know. It was so good. I rated this one 5 stars. The quotes in this book are so beautiful, and I don't even know what to say. Like, it was just so good. That's all I got. But basically this one follows childhood lovers. You can't really call them lovers because they were just kids, but they had thought they were gonna get married, you know, so cute little kids. And then she ends up leaving town very abruptly and comes back to town after her brother is in prison, and everyone knows what he did and everything. So the family name is tarnished, and she gets bullied a lot, but she ends up going to this new school, and she sees this childhood friend that she used to have, and he's not really the same anymore. He's kind of like more more dark and broody, but they end up having unlikely friendship form. So we have that childhood lovers to strangers to friends to lovers again, and it was just so beautifully done. It has that second chance romance kind of feel, but you also see them fall in love, and it had some elements of suspense as well. Like it's much more than it seems, so that was very surprising to me. But what a great story. I really want to reread this and annotate it. It was just so beautiful, and I highly recommend that you pick this one up if you have been on the fence about it like I was. You need it. I actually cried for like 20 minutes reading this book. It had that June 1st kind of feel for me, which that book also made me sob. Next, I read Treading Water, which is a spicy little novella that it has age gap, it's coach athlete, it's water polo, and it was so good. Okay, just read it. Just read it. It's gonna take you like literally no time at all. It's a fun, spicy read if you love an age gap romance and also a sports romance, or if you liked Waking Olivia by Elizabeth O'Rourke, pick this one up. The next couple books I did vlog, so I won't go too in depth with these ones, but I read Chokehold, which was a 4.5 star. It was a male romance that follows stepbrothers, and it had masked men, just crazy unhinged plot, kind of problematic. So if you're not into the problematic romances, then steer clear of this one. It's very toxic and had sort of a suspense plot as well, just very dramatic and crazy, but that was really what I was in the mood for at the moment, so I ended up really liking it. It was so spicy, oh my god. And then I also read Cirobscurum, which is a new K.A. Knight book, and that one was also really unhinged, but it had a circus plot, and it was a circus that came alive when somebody needed help with something. Like if you basically called on the circus when you were at your lowest, and then they asked you if you wanted to join the circus or needed help or something of that nature, and it was so good but so unhinged. It had sort of a revenge plot to it because our female main character is in an abusive relationship and she ends up wanting to get revenge on her ex, and it was a good time. It had a why choose romance, so there's 4 guys, I think. They're all named after the different cards. It was giving more horror vibes, which I think this is pitched as erotic horror, and that makes a lot of sense. Definitely had a lot of horror elements to it. There's a lot of killing expeditions, so if you're not into that, don't even try this one. And then also on the same energy, I didn't vlog this one, but Wristlock was another one that was circus themed. I liked this one even more though. It was so good. It was a MMF story that had aerial. It was kind of more sports-esque rather than like the magical circus vibe of Cirobscurum, but it had the sports romance, college romance kind of vibe, and it had 2 male main characters that were very different and provided different things to our female main character. We have like the darker, broody one, and then like the golden retriever best friend energy that she still wants to bang. So it was just really fun. So that one I definitely recommend. I remember I was screaming about it when I read it, and I think the second one is already out, so I need to pick it up. But I love anything circusy. I feel like it allows for some unique spicy scenes, which Wristlock definitely had. Then we have Morning Glory Milking Farm, which was a classic literature pick, and I'm sure I've talked about this already, I think in previous vlogs. So again, I won't go too much into it, but it is a monster romance Minotaur version, and it was surprisingly sweet, and I rated it 4 stars. So I definitely would recommend it, especially if you're new to the monster romance dynamic, but I really ended up loving this one, and I need to read more by this author. Moving on, we have Powerful and Reckless, which I also read in vlogs, so I won't go too much into them, but Powerful I feel like was doing too much. I just didn't really like it that much. I rated it 3 stars. I feel like the author was trying too hard to make you emotional, and it just didn't work for me. It was just trying too hard for my taste. But Reckless and the main story I really loved. Reckless I actually liked more than Powerless, and I can't wait to read the next book, which is coming out soon-ish. Well, not really that soon, but I'm definitely looking forward to it. The ending of this book had me shook, and the vlog has all that. So if you wanted to see my reactions to this book, there is a vlog recently on this one. And I just loved the romance in this one and how it definitely catered to romance readers more so than like the fantasy elements in the second book, but I was not mad at it at all. Then we have Quicksilver by Callie Hart. I've talked about this one in a lot of videos recently, so I won't go into it, but it is one of my favorite reads of the year. It's a fantasy romance. It is so worth the read. If you haven't read it yet, you definitely need to. It's so good and well done and just gives different energy than other fantasy romances right now, which is what I craved so much. And the characters you'll fall in love with, the found family aspect you'll fall in love with, the world is very interesting, and the magic system is also interesting, and you need to read it. If you like fantasy romance, you need to read it. I know everyone's talking about it right now, but it's worth the hype. Pick it up. Okay, last two books are 5-star reads. So we have Savorite by Tara DeWitt. This one was another surprising one for me. I just picked it up on a whim at the bookstore and I loved the cover, and I just had heard some good reviews when I had read it, and then it blew me away. I loved the messages in this book. I know I've said that about like every book on this list, but this one also had a beautiful message, okay? We follow Fisher, who is a Michelin star chef, and he has had some tragedies happen. He lost his sister, and he's now the caretaker of his niece, and he just needs a fresh start, kind of a reset. So his boss ends up sending him to Oregon, to this really small town, to lead this restaurant menu that's going to be this new restaurant, this new development that the town is not really a fan of. The idea of like developing their town, because it's a small town, really close-knit, kind of Gilmore Girls energy. Anyway, then we have our female main character, Sage, and she's very much into the towny things. She loves her town. She's part of all these committees. She loves doing all of the activities and leading things. And her ex is going to be in this competition with his new girl, and she really wants to win the competition this year, and she ends up asking Fisher to be her partner, and he agrees, and then this romance blossoms, and it's so beautiful the way that they kind of take care of each other in different aspects, and they both build each other's confidence in different ways, and it balances the cute with the really serious topics so well. The overall message in this book was to live your life authentically to you without the pressures of other people's opinions weighing down on you, and it really came through so well because we have a teenage character that also is feeling the same way as Fisher sometimes does, in a different way, obviously, in a more angsty teenage way. It really encouraged you to live a soft life. If that's what you're yearning for, live your soft life, and it's okay. It's okay to want things that are cliche. It's okay to want a life that's different from some of your friends. So good. I loved it, and it was such a great romance, and the title was so fitting for like the chef aspect, but then also like savor the little moments, savor your romance, savor your life. All right, and lastly we have a thriller. I know, crazy, but I read Middle of the Night by Riley Sager, and I ended up really loving it. I am not a very harsh critic when it comes to thrillers, at least in my opinion. I only pick up like 3 a year, and so it doesn't take much to woo me. But I really like this one, and I ended up being really emotional at the end, which I wasn't expecting. But in this one we have like a 90s feel with a best friend that went missing and a unsolved mystery. A man comes back to his hometown and he's getting all these memories coming flooding back because his best friend went missing when they were camping in their backyard in a tent, and it just goes through the mystery of what happened. And it was just really fun to try to piece together everything and predict in your head what's actually happening. But in the end, it was very nostalgic feeling, and it had kind of a sad feeling, to like a melancholy tone to the story. So I really liked it. 5 stars. I like Riley Sager's books usually, so I was looking forward to it. But those are all of the books that I've read recently. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and hopefully I can make more soon. I'm hoping to do a fall TBR perhaps. If you want to see that, be sure to leave a orange heart emoji in the comments down below, or a black heart emoji, whatever your heart desires. But I will see you in my next video, and have a great day where you are. Bye guys!